It's been a while since I've made a video highlighting specific planting guilds that we've done here at the main Edible Acres site. And in particular, what I thought I'd like to focus on is the guild that was designed around this dying sweet cherry. This is one of the older trees in the yard, starting this whole project, if you can imagine, with the exception of that sweet cherry right there. All the other trees and plants you see have been planted here since 2009, so we're filling it out into a food forest. But some thought around this cherry, which when we first bought the property 10 years ago had a few issues, and every year has been getting more and more issues. You can see the crown is at 20% of leaf right now. In fact, let me look at it from another angle. Right now I'm standing due west of this sweet cherry, and you can see the crown. The majority of the crown is completely dead. The only branches that have any life left in them are the southernmost. You can see a few there. So real quick question that would come up for most people is like, okay, so you see this large tree in the middle of the yard, you want to design a food forest with all these different edible elements. Why are you leaving this dying and diseased tree in the middle of all this? Well, there's a number of reasons. One, as the canopy of this sweet cherry great-grandma starts to shed more and more, there's less and less shade being cast. So even without cutting it down, that dead scaffold provides very little shade and competition for the understory plants that are below it. As the cherry starts to pass away more and more, its root system is shedding and sloughing off nutrients into the soil. And so what we've done is taken this old sweet cherry that has been here way before we got here, and as a nod of respect left her in the landscape as the southern centralmost element in this guild. And you can see all the other plants that have been added are completely content with this arrangement and patiently waiting for her to pass away. And there's no rush for her to do so because everyone's thriving. So let's look at some of the other cast of characters that are in here. Now I'm to the south and slightly east of this whole guild. I would venture a guess this is roughly about 20 feet wide in an east-west pattern and about 16 feet deep. And I'm going to focus my attention on just the plants that have been intentionally added into this space. Directly underneath the trunk of this sweet cherry, I've added black currants, some Jerusalem artichokes. We put in some nettles a little ways back. There's some lemon balm. Black currants, as I've mentioned many times, completely shade tolerant. So even if that cherry rebounded or kept its canopy indefinitely, these black currants would still be productive in this context. So they're fine. They're not waiting for anything to change. The sunchokes, they could use a little more light. They lean forward, make their nice flowers, and they're enjoying the root die-off right around the base of that cherry and tolerating the partial shade well enough. In fact, it may even keep them in check a little bit. Underneath the cherry, just to the north of her, are some really beautiful hostas. You can see the flowers are just getting ready to start. And lemon balm has volunteered in here, completely compatible with the hosta, so we leave it. Now that's probably the shadiest context, is just to the north of this cherry. So far we've only looked at small shrubs and herbaceous. So part of the idea with succession and the idea of some trees passing away and adding appropriate trees to get into the canopy later, you can see to the south and west I've planted an American persimmon. Now this tree, I don't know that I'm necessarily thrilled with the vigor on this one overall. It's got a weird form, a lot of weird cankers and dots all over it, and that's fine. If it ends up becoming diseased and really not a super healthy tree, we can either use it as a chop and drop or just let it be, and maybe it'll pass away and provide some more nutrient for everybody else. Because just to the west of it is a Siberian peach. That's this friend right here. And so if that persimmon, which is to the south and east of this peach, becomes problematic, I'm very happy to consume it through loppers and feed it to the root zone of that peach, because the peach seems quite happy here. Just to the north of the peach is a Carpathian walnut. We find that this landscape, you can see it's this friend here, about 15 feet tall now, 12 feet tall. juglans overall, the family does incredibly well on this property. So wherever there's a little gap, we sneak them in. And you can see as the cherry passes on, there's ample room for it to skirt up into the canopy in this whole area and lean a little to the south. Just to the north of that Carpathian Walnut, now we start to get into the true overstory late succession canopy trees. This is a northern hardy pecan, just one of the happiest and healthiest trees we've got in this whole landscape. Planted in 2009. You can see it's already maybe 6 to 8 inches in diameter at the base. Insanely well formed, beautiful scaffold, minimal pruning, and as the northwesternmost element, this tree can become the towering behemoth that it wants to be without really challenging anybody else in this scenario. So that's nice to have the northernmost part of a given guild be the tallest element. Let's look at some other friends in here. There's that majestic pecan from another angle. It's an incredibly happy tree. I'd be interested to see within my lifetime how large it gets. I suspect it'll be one of the biggest trees in the landscape here. Just to the east of it, of that northern pecan, is a Shagbark Hickory. Now talk about taking your time in getting crops. The pecan hasn't even hinted at flowering yet. It's 11 years old, but we're in it for the long haul with all of these beings. Shagbark Hickory, another one that takes quite a long time. Well, 11 years later, there's the first nut. Pretty easy to take that as, my God, how can you wait 10 years, 12 years in order to get a single nut from a tree? It's just the beginning. It'll be our whole lifetime that these trees will be cropping. And in the meantime, we've already had currants, we've had sunchokes, we've had persimmons, we've had some peaches, so what's the rush? But anyway, these are the tallest trees, the hickory and the pecan, to the north of the cherry. And again, as that cherry sheds more and more of its canopy and gets closer and closer to passing away, it's been completely compatible with the development and the succession of these much larger trees. So, long story short, long story long, the idea of designing around a grandmother tree or a tree that's slowly breaking down, slowly passing away, you don't have to strike the whole canopy in order to be able to plant in and move succession forward in a direction of more diversity and resiliency. Thimbleberries being a carpeting ground cover under here. A couple true hemlocks, very competent in the shade. They can grow and do their thing. We may thin them out to just one at some point. A nice cornice friend, an ornamental dogwood, and another Carpathian walnut in the southeast corner to pollinate our friend the Carpathian on the western side. Lots of other characters in here, of course. There's ground nuts, there's more nettles, there's thornless blackberries, but very complex and yet pretty straightforward. Plant the shortest and shade-tolerant most plants on the south side under the tree. Plant trees that can lean into the light available to them in the glades of the lawn on the edges. Shade-tolerant most shade-tolerant plants in the understory and the interior, and tallest trees to the north. Some basic formulas to follow, and overall a really functional space in here. Everybody seems to be thriving. The cherry not so much, but it's lovely to have her slowly pass away at her leisure, and we'll leave her skeleton up as long as possible to be a perfect snag for all the birds to enjoy as it slowly breaks down. Thanks, old tree. You're doing wonderful things. I hope you had a really good life when you were younger. Thanks for watching.